So now that's embarrassing as hell because that means it's taken us 3 years to try to get this episode recorded.
It's all good. It's all good.
Hello and welcome to Dots, Lines, and Destinations, episode 121. It is October 13th, 2016. I'm Stephen Seagraves, today joined by Seth Miller. Hey, Seth.
Hello. Did you know that tonight's episode number is a square?
Is it? Oh, it is a square.
11 squared, right?
Yeah, it is. That is. My wife will appreciate that as the math teacher that she is.
Well, as the math dork that I am, I just noticed it as we were starting to record, so you know.
We have a special guest today, Matthew Ma from The Flight Deal. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. I mean, is this going to be a show? We're going to be start talking about math problems all day?
We can if you want. If you want to talk about math,
listen,
we can totally.
Math and numbers are a critical part of finding the right fare deal. I mean, in your case, it's like division of cents per mile, right?
Yes, pretty much. That's
it's simple math, but you know.
Yeah, without algorithms, I think I would have issues. I mean, I'm not exactly the greatest math person, but...
Should we send you over a calculator? Would that make it easier?
Well, I still have my, I was a finance major, and I still have my HP 12B here somewhere. So right. Yeah, I could do some reverse Polish on it.
All right, so that would be 121, enter, square root, enter, right?
Yes. Actually, you need to... But the great thing about the HP is that you don't have to do the last enter; it'll just automatically calculate after every.
Well, there you go. It shows you how much I know about reverse Polish notation, and I'm just playing along here. So I want you to tell us all your secrets, every single one of them.
Well,
okay, related to fares though, at least.
I think to take it from the beginning. I mean, I think we should definitely explain how every airline put the fares up onto the distribution systems, and then what happens from there, and then how does everyone can take advantage of that. It's pretty simple. I mean, if you look at there's two types of fares, right? There's international fares and then there's domestic fares. International fares, every airline have the capability to upload their fares every hour on the hour. So for example, if you see a great international deal between New York to Europe, for example, you shouldn't really go on it because you could really literally be gone in the next 60 minutes. And, because of the time frame it requires to, get through the distribution systems, you really don't really have an hour. Everything is done in a batch process, if you think about it. And then on domestic fares, it's uploaded, first thing in the morning at 10, then at noon, at 4, and then 8 o'clock. And then on the weekends, it's only updated once per day at 5 p.m. So that's the schedule. And if people go like, you should always look at Tuesday, because that's when most fares are uploaded. That's actually not true. The airlines actually have the capability to do it multiple times a day, depending on what type of fare it is. I think for most people, the quickest way in terms of picking the fares up, for most general users, Google Flights, usually have it, within a little bit after the fare is uploaded. So for most general users, you can definitely, the quickest place to pick it up right now is probably Google Flights, if you're just looking for something. So I think that's the kind of extent we can get down to without getting down to the nitty gritty.
But I like the nitty gritty. From the obviously with the fare loads and this and that, Google Flights. Now, are they pulling part of the allure of Google Flights is that they can give you click through links for bookings?
Right.
Is that based on are they not attacking, but are they pulling data directly from the OTAs from these websites? Or are they pulling is this all sort of the ITA data where they sort of run one of these systems and then they can refer you out and assume that fare will be loaded on whatever site they send you to?
Right.
What I'm saying? Right? Are they scraping or is it, are they hoping that the fare is there?
So the thing is that I think, the funny thing is that Google data, flight data, and ITA data sometimes doesn't really sync directly. So for example, on Google Flights, there's more, basically low-cost carriers that doesn't show up on ITA. From conversations that we have with Google Flights, the Google travel team, it seems like, they have negotiating relationships directly, depending on what type of data. So like, for example, like low-cost carriers, right? You can find Ryanair on Google Flights, which you cannot do on ITA. So I think there are some of the data they're getting from the GDS and some of the data I believe that they are directly getting from the airlines directly.
I want to take a half step back here. You guys are working directly with the Google Travel team. You have insider access. Hang on a second.
No. But we
is this just like good friends who are using your stuff to get deals too?
No. The question that they asked us, because we are big proponents of using ITA, is how come we don't use
Google Flights instead?
Yeah, and our big thing with that is that if you I'm sure you both have used Google Flights extensively, is that the calendar on Google Flights is a pseudo 30-day calendar, so it doesn't give you true availability that if you do like a 30-day search on ITA that gives you. And since we don't do low cost carriers in general, we're not doing Spirit or Frontier or Ryanair of the world. ITA serves so much better purpose because the 30-day calendar is much nicer.
Go ahead, Stephen.
I was going to ask on the same lines then, because you can't use, say, the ITA fancy notation or the special search criteria in Google Flights. Right. Really, is that also one of those things that's kind of like a limiting factor for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we do is say, hey, we're telling them, hey, there's a fear with American, you should go look for it, right? I think with Google Flights, it's bringing everything. It's much more difficult to narrow it down. If we want to, for example, do things that are not showing overnight, for example, right? For example, right now, what we have noticed in the last year and a half, 2 years, is that attack fears from American specifically to South America, Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. A lot of it has overnight connections. So, on ITA, we can explicitly say, do not show any availability with overnights that requires overnight layover. And on Google Flights, you don't have that capability. So, there's things that you can do on ITA that you cannot do on Google Flights. And I think, what we want to get our users to is not, we want them to show them, what they can do and show them real availability and not have to go, do whack-a-mole, on Google Flights. I think for most fears, Google Flights is fine, but for what we want to show for the price that we are explicitly showing it, we want to show people how to do it on ITA.
That's fair. I actually, Stephen, you asked a question. You asked a different question than I thought you were going to, and what I was one of the things we talked about before the show started, or that Stephen and I talked about, surprise, is that sort of looking at LCCs and how that's shifting the market. I know you guys have published some Norwegian fares in the past.
Right.
That's certainly an LCC, but it also is an LCC that shows up in ITA and all the GDS platforms. So is it a function of you publish fares that you can actually find easily, and so that your users and readers and followers can find easily, or is it more about just that you don't like Spirit and Frontier?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think, Norwegian, the challenge with Norwegian is that it shows up on ITA, but the data is not perfectly synced. And I think, we are all ITA users, and I think we all know that, that has been a problem with ITA for a very long time, where the airlines are not sending ITA real-time data. For example, Turkish fares, for example.
Yeah.
Right? The minute it gets uploaded, it's accurate, meaning that, if you know when a Turkish fare gets uploaded, you can pretty much go like, hey, any day you buy it, it will sync pretty much everywhere, right? But as time progresses, that data degrades. And then, you get into the problem where ITA is showing you availability and you go and try to buy it on any OTA, it will not show up at all. Or even directly on their site, it doesn't show up at all. And I think, right now, at least in our experience, Norwegian has that problem too, where unless you know exactly when the fare gets uploaded or released, there's a syncing issue. So, to circle back to your original question is like, do we show, when do we do Norwegian fares? I think part of it is that, we do have a deal editorial policy where we try to do a deal a day for every city that we cover. We have 12 cities that we're covering on the flight deal, and another 10 on, our sister site, Fare Deal Alert. I think, when we do low-cost carrier deals, it's because, for that particular city, there just isn't a deal that, we haven't done in a period of time frame that, I think if you look at the data, what that time frame is, but I don't really want to explicitly say it. But, we try not to do it unless, we have basically have no other option and go like, hey, there's a Norwegian deal out there. Let's go and do the Norwegian deal.
So much like me as the cheap bastard trying to fly to Europe, Norwegian is also your airline of last resort.
Yes, pretty much. Norwegian and WoW, basically. If we're doing that, it's basically, like, hey, we really don't, have this, the regular airlines don't really have an option. And I think we need to circle back on that, right? Why do we think that, a normal airline is better than a low-cost carrier, right? I mean, I think we get that question a lot. And I think when you factor in the total cost, luggage and seat assignments and things like that, in most cases, the low cost carriers are same or more than a normal carrier when there's a sale. And I think when Norwegian came into the US originally, I think their service reliability really scares off. We posted some deals, and some of our users go like, "Hey, I've been stuck at the airport for 2 days now, or a day waiting for my flight," and they didn't have the equipment to basically recover from that, because there's as Norwegian is very aggressive with the scheduling. Same thing with WoW, and when something screws up, especially in the winter, you could be waiting forever. I think they do a much better job now, but definitely two plus years ago they were not. They were
sure.
Just,
I got lucky, so to speak, quote unquote lucky, and got the high-fly A340 sub for my 787 and a 6-hour delay.
Right.
Although to be fair, I actually finally filed the thing and the paperwork to get the court case. I appealed and told them they owed me EU compensation, and they told me to piss off. And I finally went with, and I was too lazy to file the claim, and finally went with AirHelp to try to get my 600 euros, which sadly is worth 30% less, I think, than it was at the time the incident happened, just on exchange rates. Plus, I got to pay 30% out to them for getting the win in theory, but I'll take my $400 and still call it a pretty good day, I think, at the end of all this.
Yeah, in Hi-Fi, which I think right now Norwegian still uses as a backup.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, if you go on a 340, you're going from 8 across to 9 across, which is much tighter even on a 787 9 across.
Yeah, it's interesting. The seat was okay, and the Hi-Fly 340 has more seats, I think, than Norwegian 787. So there's actually space for everybody, and maybe I had an empty seat next to me or something like that. It wasn't awful, but also there were stains on the seats that were completely impossible to identify, and I didn't try because it just disgusted me so much, and it was nasty. I was not happy.
I mean, we finally flew Norwegian, recently. I mean, earlier this year when they started the Martinique service.
Oh yeah. So the 737s.
Yeah, and it's fine. I mean, we have flown them within Europe itself, because obviously within Europe there's plenty of flights from them. And they're okay. I mean, I don't want to go and say, hey, if people want to go and can travel light, that's certainly a good option. I mean, I don't, we don't want to say, hey, that's something you should take. I just think that for most travelers, if they wait for a sale on a regular airline, they can get a much better deal, basically.
Sure. And I will say it's interesting. I saw their Norwegian press release came out earlier this week. They said they're over 90% load factor on their long haul flights. So that whole, maybe I'll get an empty middle seat next to me thing, not on Norwegian, you won't.
I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, they're good at,
they sell every seat they can.
Yeah, and they do a good job of marketing right now. It's the price is very enticing if someone's looking at it, and it's available on the GDSs. So if you go to any OTA and you happen to plug in the right dates, when they do have a flight, they would be likely cheaper than anyone else. But the challenge with that is that most people are not factoring in the luggage cost.
Yeah, Norwegian's long haul routes in September had a load factor of 96%.
That is crazy.
I actually cannot believe that they can pull that off.
But hey, when you're selling US to Europe for under $150 each way, you can definitely do that.
I still I think the fact that they can keep selling seats at that point and not screw it up too badly is amazing. You can always fill seats if you price it cheap enough. I just think the fact that they get the numbers that right and that high, 96% is unheard of historically in the airline industry. But
I mean, if anyone's getting 80, 82, 83, 84, they're super happy, right? With the right yield management, you should be making money, and the fact that they get to 96, even at their prices, I mean, I'm sure their luggage fees and things like that, they're making a killing on that, because most people do pay for that. So more power to them. I mean,
I was just amazed by that number. That's literally no empty seats almost every flight. It's crazy.
Yeah, and to be honest, without Norwegian and WoW, entering the U.S. market in the last 2.5 plus years, we wouldn't be seeing these very reasonable fares on normal airlines to basically most of Europe right now. If everyone waits for the right sale to Europe, for example from New York, you don't really have to pay more than $5 to pretty much go anywhere in Europe right now if you wait for the right sale, and that's and that is pretty crazy, because that reminds me of I'm sure you guys around 2000 when it was when they had the weekend fares. Do you guys remember $99 to go to London, for example, each way? And you just go because it was so cheap.
Yeah, I say we started an annual drinking trip to Europe in the winter because it was cheap. Yeah. You get $250, $300 round trip tickets without trying too hard. It was a great, cheap, good beer weekend in Europe, and now, 8 years later, we're still going, but it's sure as hell not. It wasn't that cheap. I don't know if it's because we're picking the wrong destinations or what, but and it's come back down. But there was a period where our $300 drinking weekends became $800-900 for off-peak service.
Yeah.
It
was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, when we first started the site, having a deal to Europe for under $700 was like, our fans and readers would go nuts on it, right? Now, if you put something up for $700, they're like, oh, that's not a deal.
$350. They want it for $350. They want it for half that.
Yeah, and I think that's just, perspective. I think, and that some of it has to do with how the economic conditions are in Europe. Obviously, dollar is so strong. There's less Europeans, flying this way to the U.S. And then obviously, the fact that there's more competition, right? And there's definitely more capacity than ever before in analytics. So it's just a very, very interesting time right now.
I was going to ask that kind of along the lines of what you just said. Is you said when you guys started the site, what actually got you starting to find these fairs? Were you doing it as a hobby, and then you guys kind of got together and said, "This is fun, but we could share some of this and help other people"? Yeah,
I mean, both of you have met all of us. I think there's 12 of us on the team, and we know each other. But the team itself, ourselves, have known each other. We're friends in real life, and we know each other 20 plus years. We all went to school together pretty much, and we met in school. And we all were doing jobs that require us to travel a lot. And because of that, you play around with it. You just see what the deals are and the trends are, and we would send emails originally to our friends and family, and people go like, hey, and then we start asking questions, and so we we got tired of questions coming in. And we just say, hey, let's put up the website. And when we originally saw this, it was really for our friends and family. And then, people started finding it. We have never done any marketing. We have never done any pay advertisement at all, ever. I think in totality, we have talked to, you guys being one, maybe under 10 people who are like, in like the press.
Oh God, Stephen, we're the press. What did we do wrong?
But I think any of you guys know us. We're not really publicity seekers. We don't really we don't make a big fuss about anything. So yeah, we built the website, and a bunch of us are have a tech background, but a lot of us done finance, and we use that knowledge to basically build some algorithms and go look for deals automatically, and then the decisions that we make on a daily basis is basically what deals do we put up, because New York, for example, there'll be a lot of options, but we're not going to put up every deal. It doesn't really make sense.
So you're saying there's the secret flightdeal.com that's got all the data, and just the regular flightdeal.com is for us peons out here in the rest of the world.
Yes, and then we talk about that. I think when we first had our first gathering, and you were talking about where our cost was, and we talked about the fact that the public site is actually not that expensive for us to maintain. It's the public site is built on WordPress, so we're manually typing in what the deal is, how you look for it, etc., etc. That doesn't cost much, right? It's the back end stuff, like how do you go and process all this data that comes in? What do you do with it? And how do you make decisions in terms of do I today put up a deal to China versus a deal to the Caribbean? There's a lot of decisions that needs to be made in terms of that, because it's like if the last month there's been, if our readers seen 8 deals to China, they don't want to see another one. It doesn't matter how cheap it is. They're just sick and tired of it. So so it's like, okay, that's when people go like, why do you put a deal to literally a city that no one wants to travel to? Well, it's because it's something new. You might want to see it. Diversity means a lot to us because we don't want to go to the same places over and over again. So I think we value destination variety more so than anything else.
Nice. I want to go back to one of the things you said just a minute ago. You talked about you haven't done any advertising. It's all been word of mouth and this and that. And I'm going to just come out and say it. I'm terribly jealous because you guys built something word of mouth that has basically made you into rock stars, and you have traction and all this stuff. And I've got my sites that I do shit advertising for, and I get shit for it. So I just want to put that out there as A, being jealous, but B, what's that like when we've been to the happy hours. We've seen, the fun and crazy that comes out of that. But do you guys deal with it outside of that as well?
No, I think, we are extremely humbled by it more so than anything else. We say it every time. I think we are truly amazed at how generous and grateful everyone is in terms of sharing the deals with their friends and family. and within the social networks. And that to us means more than anything, that we can possibly do ourselves. That, the deals can enable our readers to go and travel, and it's worthy enough for them to share with their friends, right? So to us, that means a lot. So, I think as long as we continue to provide value on one hand, and, our readers are getting value on the other, and they continue to see that, we are trying very hard to make sure that they are getting the best deals on a day-to-day basis. As long as we do that, I think, we are truly humbled by the response that we are getting on a day-to-day basis, more than anything else. And I don't think there's anything to be jealous of, Seth, to be honest with you. I mean,
I'm mostly just teasing, but yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, both of you, I mean, you guys, share deals all the time, and we are, when we see that, we are like, oh, that is extremely humbling to us when people take the time to go and share it with, their friends and family and social network. And you met us. I mean, I think for us, this is seriously something that, we've done as a hobby to help our friends and family. And now, our friends, is much bigger than when we first started. So, we're humbled by it, and we hope we don't lose that trust in terms of providing deal value on a day-to-day basis, more than anything else. And on some days, we'll screw up because, we're not doing the right thing. But, our goal is to, have the deals before other people for most of our deals, because, it's impossible to be first with every deal. But, I think for the majority of the deals that, we put up there, we want to be first. And as long as we continue to do that, then we'll be okay.
Yeah, fair enough. Arguably, one of the big appeals or sort of focuses, it seemed, foci of your site when you first started was, what could be considered mileage runs, right? Cheap fares, there's a CPM number all the time, where to credit, all that stuff. Has revenue-based destroyed that aspect of the business? And I mean, obviously the business wasn't always about that, but has it changed how you guys are managing that?
So the funny thing is that, I think that we have two bifurcated audiences, right? We have the audience that's like you, me, and Stephen, which is very oriented toward, getting lowest CPM possible, maximizing mileage earning in every possible sense of the way, right? And then you have our audience who have never traveled, who doesn't care about that. They just care about the lowest price possible. I would say that, in the mountain points world, it's very male dominant. Our audience is mostly female. So, and even our team is mostly female. And I think that comes from that, where, we are not exclusively focused on mileage run. We never have. We use 6 cents as a benchmark to say, this is the baseline criteria for when we put a deal up. But we never say, hey, we're going to go aggressively look at mileage runs. And when we first started, I think, we didn't really have an idea what would resonate more than anything else. And, I think we tried to do mileage run deals, but then we realized that it didn't really get the traction that we would get if you just did a deal, like, for example, we'll get more traffic from a deal that is between New York and San Francisco for $300 than a deal that is 1 cent a mile from New York to Boise.
No one wants to go to Boise. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
we apologize for our listeners.
So you guys just killed our Idaho, market. Thanks. To be fair, I'm sure I've offended far more demographics than what you just did. So we'll accept it.
It's not trying to offend anyone. It's we are, I think, we are trying to be data driven, and we do have a lot of data what works, what doesn't. And we put up an annual, on every January 1st, for the last 3+ years, we've been putting out exactly what deals we have put up. And if someone actually goes to the time to actually look at it, they can actually see what resonates and what doesn't, based on just the deal volume. And you'll get a good idea of what resonates with our audience and what doesn't. It's there. I mean, all the data is there. We are very transparent in terms of what we put up. And we don't try to go and trying to find an esoteric OTA that will price it 2 cents lower than what you can find on GDS published fares. But the data is there. I mean, I think most people from a traveling perspective go to the same places. From the East Coast, the Caribbean is hot. Mexico is hot. Europe is hot. From the West Coast, you put through a deal to Hawaii. If people are interested in making money, they will make a lot of money doing that. So, and I don't think deals themselves would drive incremental traffic. And I think there's a common perception that the price itself would drive tons of people to go to a destination they've never been. It doesn't really happen. You might get a few hundred people. I think the only time that a mistake fare or great deal that happened that drove a lot of people to a place that they have never been to was the Etihad Christmas sale, right? Let's just call it the sale, where it was $197 to go from New York to Abu Dhabi. And, I think 20,000 people got into that deal in 18 hours, and about half of those went to the UAE. And the other half went to, other part of the network that they have.
That's an interesting observation, and I'm sure it's backed up with your data that people cheapness doesn't necessarily mean people are going to go there. Like for me, that's very attractive. Oh, like a cheap fare to somewhere new, that's very attractive. But then there's like a whole segment of the market that is not me, that doesn't care how cheap it is. They're not going to go to Cambodia, regardless how cheap it is.
Yeah, I mean, right now you can go to Cambodia on the Chinese Airlines for like $500.
Yeah,
but you don't see, there's no numbers that correlates to say, hey, tourism numbers in Cambodia has exponentially gone because it's $20 from the US, right? You don't see that much more American tourists going to Cambodia.
Yeah.
And if that was the case, then you would, just think about how much capacity the Chinese airlines are throwing to Asia right now. I mean, I think we're all seeing the Chinese airlines, China Eastern, China Southern, Air China, Hainan. Those guys right now are, would have 30, 40 flights a day to the US.
Yeah.
All on wide bodies. And you're talking about, 30 times, let's say let's say conservatively 200 seats per plane, right? You're talking about 9,000 seats. Yeah. And let's just go up 10,000 seats because, some of them, have 300 seats. Let's just go up to that. Let's say 10,000 seats a day. You would think that the tourism numbers, for these countries would increase tremendously. And, it hasn't really been that. That's how fares will continue to go down because there's just so much capacity. So I don't think people are just going because it's cheap. I mean, like, Asia, the places that people go to in Asia, for example, is Hong Kong, Tokyo, Bangkok, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
really, seriously.
No, I agree. I mean, I look at like Hainan, because Hainan has a few flights a day out of Seattle, which is close, and they're dirt cheap, $400 to Hong Kong, which is insane. Right. I mean, you have to connect through Shanghai and fly Hong Kong Airlines, but for $400, that's probably the cheapest you're going to find across the Pacific.
Right, but you don't see incrementally more people going to Hong Kong than the US than before, right? And I think that's how come. I think our experience where there's a great deal that happened, and we see our friends on the flight, we go like, oh, everyone's buying it. Not really, within this very small segment of the population is buying it. And that's not going to really change. People, there's also other challenge with just U.S. flyers in general, right? Only about 30% of the population have U.S. passports, so you only have
that's still 100 million people.
Yeah, but 100 million people, where do they go to? What is the number one and number two destination for Americans?
It's going to be Canada and the Caribbean now.
Yeah, Canada and Mexico. So it's not like, it's not like they're going far, So it's if just to go back, like, for example, there's, right now there's always a deal almost every day to South Africa, right? To go to Johannesburg from New York or anywhere in the East Coast for under $800. It's like pretty common now. You don't see, uptick in US to South Africa tourism that much.
Yeah. I have this kind of perspective of some business class fares, which I know you guys don't cover, and we can talk about that in a minute. But there was some decent fares not too long ago out of basically everywhere, $1,200 to Europe, all over Europe, in business class. And I told some friends about it, and these friends aren't necessarily frequent travelers, and they kind of shrugged. They were like, eh. And I'm like, well, you're not gonna. There's no way for you to ever get to Budapest for $1,200 in coach. I mean, that's wrong now, but then, but then it was like, oh, $1,200 in business class is actually a deal to Budapest, and they kind of just shrugged, like, I'll go somewhere else. I'd rather go to Barcelona. Like, you have a fare to Barcelona?
Yeah. But I think also for us, we put value in travel, right?
Yeah.
A lot of our friends don't necessarily put that as a number one priority.
Yeah.
So I think, you also have to look at it that way, where they go like, well, yeah, it's cheap, but you know what? For the $1,000 I'm going to spend, I can just, have a great weekend in my city, wherever that might be.
Yeah.
And I think, there's also that where, within our community that, that exists, and it's not, I think there's a lot of talk that it's a big community. It's big, but it's not like big. I don't know if that makes sense. For us, we put such huge priority in terms of seeing the world. And I don't think, most people have that value system in terms of, how they value travel is not as big of a deal. Number one or number two on the list.
Yeah.
So I think that's that. And $1,200 is cheap for business class for sure. And then, but for a lot of people still, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I don't jump at deals unless they're down to 500 for business class transatlantic. Man's got to have standards, damn it.
If you find that, let me know.
That was a BA One World deal that was alive for like 2 hours, at like 4 o'clock one morning. I don't know what fair filing it was in, but I was jet lagged and stupid and awake too early, and I was in Brazil, so I was an hour earlier than East Coast, and got 2 tickets booked, and then it disappeared like shortly after I started to try to tell people to go book it. That was a crazy one. So that was just good timing. I got lucky.
And so you didn't even have to do like a Avios copay on that? There was a straight up.
No, that was straight up as a mistake.
Wow.
That was a complete mistake. There was a missing zero or something like that. Every now and then you get lucky on those, but
right. I mean, $5. I mean, you know.
I think it was $5.50. It was also ex Oslo, so right. I mean, that's been one of the.
Yeah.
It's actually an interesting question for you, maybe. I'm in the middle still of probably 3 consecutive years where almost all of my travel to and from Europe is Europe originating.
Yep.
Because it's cheaper. And I don't know, it's partly, as you said before, it's partly demand, it's partly currency, it's a lot of different things going on. But I seem to find myself sort of every time I need another trip, I'm like, well, there's another great deal originating in Europe. I can use it to get home from wherever I'm going to be and another event in Europe eventually. So I'll just use it as my return to that one and eventually figure out how I'm going to get home from there.
Right. So I think, you know, you hit it, where I think part of it is that the US dollar has been so strong, and I think I haven't looked at the European visitors numbers to the US recently, but it's becoming so much more expensive for them to come and visit. I mean, just look at the pound, for example, after Brexit. It's down 15%. I mean, it was like $1 to under 60. Under 70, British 70 pound sterling, and now it's like 80. So it's much more expensive for Europeans to visit.
Yeah, I will say, I was going to say one of the only reason I can actually keep doing my stupid Europe origination is because I do it too often. So if you're doing 1 or 2 trips a year, it's a lot harder to make that work.
Yeah. I mean, definitely what we have seen in the last 2 plus years is that fares from Europe is a lot cheaper now to come to the US and the US to Europe. You go to Oslo, and definitely the Norwegian effect is happening from that, where leaving out of Stockholm and Copenhagen and Helsinki is cheaper than anywhere.
And that all goes back to thanking Norwegian.
Yes, we might not fly it, but we are grateful that they're there.
Especially Foz. Foz loves Norwegian because I think he's coming back. I think from an Oslo trip right now. That's why he can't be on the show. So, like today, Emirates announced Fort Lauderdale, Dubai service.
Right.
And you guys posted a deal, and I guess it's a deal. I mean, it's $700, $697 between the two.
Right.
And it's kind of like an introductory fare. Were you guys anticipating that when you heard the news this morning? Was this team thinking, hey, there's probably going to be a good deal?
No, actually, not at all.
Yeah.
It's not even, they didn't even file it on the GDS. You can't, we couldn't find it anywhere. It was on the website when we did it this morning.
Interesting. Yeah, and I was going to say, normally those sort of intro fares are included in the press release.
Yeah,
but it wasn't the U.S. carriers do.
Yeah, they didn't even include any of that when it would go on sale, any of that like that. And I think part of it is that they may have an excess plane, sitting around maybe in December, because the announcement to launch is very, very quick, 2 months.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they're going to sell a lot of people going on a cruise. Because Steph, I don't know if you looked at it, but all the connections are really bad when it lands. The connections to the JetBlue network is not timed correctly. There's really long connections.
It depends on where you're going. It depends on where you're going. I think some of the JetBlue schedule is going to have to adjust to make it work.
Yeah.
But the Caribbean is really the target of those onward connections. So San Juan, Bahamas, possibly Cancun and some things like that. Cities that you can't get to necessarily from JFK or Boston as easily.
Yeah.
That's what it's timed for. And the return trips are all very well timed.
Right.
It seems, right? So leaving the Caribbean and headed back on that flight and then getting into Dubai for where your onward connection out of Dubai is.
Right. But yeah, the connection times in Fort Lauderdale is not that great. I mean, it's what we saw.
Yeah.
So I mean, and it's gonna be interesting because if you look at Emirates pretty much makes most of its money with connections to South Asia, and the passenger per day numbers is not that great to from South Asia to the Caribbean and things like that. So we'll see how they will.
Yeah, and I mean, and I've been actually dealing with some folks in the Caribbean aviation marketing world, and trying to draw that traffic and draw Chinese traffic and this and that. And my comment to them continues to be, it's going to have to be dirt cheap. It's still 2 stops at least, and it's a long way away for beaches that are similar to what they have there, or nearby. You can go to Guam, which, I mean, love it or hate it, you could easily sub it in for plenty of the Caribbean islands as beach goes. And
to be honest with you, like if you really want a beach vacation, go to Thailand. It's so much cheaper if you're in Asia. Why even bother? And the service is 10 times better than what you're going to get.
Yeah, so I mean, you deal with all those challenges,
right?
But I feel like there's going to be some business traffic that needs those onward connects, right? It's going to be 5 or 6 people to each of 10 different destinations, and that's a big chunk of it. And 5 or 6 at 10 destinations at either end, and all of a sudden you've got planes that are full or getting there. And don't forget, they've got crazy subsidies, right? I mean, subsidy. With the subsidy, it should be fine.
And they're putting the smallest plane that they have in the network on the sound about. So, but
which is a 260 seats 777 is the smallest plane they have that does this. So the whole thing's a little ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely amazing that they have who would have done 10 years ago that Emirates would be where they are today, right? And if you look at fares between the U.S. and in the South Asia, it's so cheap right now. If you're willing to catch a right sale, it's not it's pretty easy to go to India for like $800. Whereas it's like when we first started, that was not something that would normally happen. Now it's like you have abundance of pictures, and do you do an India deal every day?
Is the market for like South America, has that grown at all? I mean, because it seemed like at one point, a lot of airlines were trying to push South America. I mean, you had ANA and JAL all talking. I mean, JAL had a flight to, where was it? Santiago? Was that Santiago?
They had Sao Paulo from New York.
That's right. That's right.
And then Korean had the Sao Paulo flight from LA. I think South America is tough. I think it's going through some economic challenges right now, mainly led by Brazil. But you see Argentina getting out of it right now. The economy is recovering in Argentina. But I think the challenge, at least from the rest of the world to South America, is it's just so far.
Yeah.
For us, I think there's still a lot of capacity. I mean, last year, talking about last September or so, fares, to Brazil, you could have gone under $400. I mean, we went in March for $450 nonstop from New York to Rio. And it's very difficult for any of these airlines to be profitable with that kind of pricing.
Yeah.
Fly 10 hours for 3.5-4 cent CPMs. It's just not profitable.
Yep.
And you look at what does it cost the airline to fly a passenger per mile now? It's like 12-13 cents.
Yeah.
So
and
there's no way.
They're hoping to make it up in the front cabin, but that doesn't necessarily mean it happens.
Right, and like you look at the with business slowing down like Brazil, like no one is really sitting in the front. I mean, we flew American and our SWUs, clear like a ton of booking. So for 400 and change, and we flew in business class Brazil round trip, and they can't sustain that.
Yeah.
And but yeah, South America I think has a lot of potential, but I think this needs to be some rationalization of capacity. There's just too much of it. You see, Copa, putting really cheap fares out. Avianca, all a whole bunch of planes. They're putting cheap deals out, and we'll see. But I think South America, you have to have unevenness depending on what country it is.
Yeah. So
I think that brings us to the point about about not South America, like Cuba.
Cuba.
There's going to be way too much capacity for what they're trying to do.
But you're not allowed to go there as a tourist. I mean, yeah.
It's it's shocking to us to see sub $300 deals to go to Cuba, because if you imagine that all this talk about people are like the pent up demand, right? And it's just not there. Like,
well, I think there's far too many people that are still trying to pay attention to that. You can't go as a tourist law.
Right.
And the demand is there, but not enough people are willing to risk that and buy the tickets yet. Right, all the airlines have basically decided they're going to hemorrhage cash flying these routes on cheap fares until the U.S. government finally opens up tourism. And then because it's a limited number of slots, they're hoping to all cash in huge.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so we're basically back into the China 1990s kind of a model.
Yeah.
Where we're gonna all sit on the slots and hope they will pay off. And the only airline that actually had worked in that sense is United, right? I mean, like.
Sure. And I was going to say, look at Haneda slots. It was the same thing. They all took those shitty nighttime slots, and American tried it for a couple of years and gave up out of JFK, and Delta tried it out of basically every airport they could put a wide body in, and still had to give it up. But the ones the four that managed to hold on for the daytime swap, the DOT finally said, even though they made them all reapply, said, yeah, you're right, we probably shouldn't change this up. We'll keep the four the way they were. So it depends on how long you can afford to lose cash. And at least right now, especially since Cuba is really a short-haul flight on a narrow body, which is a way different cost structure than China, I think that they can probably afford to lose a little money for a while before this becomes a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, we were just shocked that, we are...
Yeah, no, they're stupid cheap. I think Delta San Francisco, right, had like a 250...
Yeah, so like a bunch of our friends are doing that, because it was basically all the United hubs, in some of the teams actually heading down there too. We can go because we are technically journalists too.
Yeah, of course, I agree. You're doing this show.
I'm not going to report you.
Yeah,
we have an audience. We can write about Cuba.
Absolutely.
But the thing is that when you're 257 going from San Francisco, that is really cheap because taxes was half of it. So
yeah,
they're on a yield perspective, they're taking a huge hit, and plus the connection. So
sure. It's
going to be interesting to see. I think there's a lot of talk, and definitely from what we have seen in terms of like this deals, you would expect it to be much more expensive, and it hasn't. So that's a positive.
Yeah.
If people are willing to go, I mean, I think to your point about the 12 categories, I think a lot of people are still afraid of that, right? They don't want to get caught.
Sure. And if you do take that risk, bring a lot of cash and preferably in euros, not dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they take a 10% hit when you try to convert US dollars with euros. They don't do that. So
straight up 10% penalty.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think the last question I have, it's kind of the most important one for the show because it's kind of like our destinations segment. What is your personal favorite destination, if you have one or multiple, and then the teams, because it sounds like the team travels together quite a bit. So is there a favorite destination?
So the team collectively likes to go to South America a lot. Actually this weekend we're heading to Ecuador.
Very nice.
But I think as a city, I think if we look at how where we've been to the most is probably Hong Kong. We are in Hong Kong a lot. There's probably one of us there on a monthly basis, one way or another.
Is there a reason? Is it just because it's hustle and bustle, like kind of like New York a little bit, or?
No. I mean, like I said, I think when we started, what we do, this is not really our primary job. A lot of us are in finance. It's one of the banking centers in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And just the nature of the business. A lot of us are there for business, and we have a lot of connections from my family, friends, etc. So we're just there a lot. But for travel as a group, we are in South America quite frequently. I know that we have Ecuador, and then some of us are going down there for Thanksgiving to Argentina. So
very nice.
we do go down there a lot. I think collectively the team, there's 12 of us. I think this year we probably do about 1 million miles on between the 12 of us. So.
Oh wow! Where are y'all going in Ecuador? Is it Quito or Guayaquil?
Yeah, we're going to Quito. I mean, I think we wanted to go to the Galapagos, but just couldn't make the timing work. It's just
it takes an extra few days to make that trip worthwhile.
Yeah.
We did. I guess it's funny you say that. 9 years ago, one of the first early deals I got in on was a Copa 267 round trip from New York to Quito, and. Even there, I went with my wife. It was on our anniversary. We went for 5 or 6 nights. I like to go a long weekend, what most people call a week-long trip. And we desperately wanted to get up to the Galapagos, but just couldn't also do anything else, basically, if that's what we did.
Right.
So.
And it's tough. I mean, so next time, but, I just always say next time. But I think, it will be an interesting trip. And, we got a really reasonable deal. Like, a couple of weeks ago, there was a deal to Ecuador, basically, for like about $300. So, going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I've been to Quito and I enjoyed it, and I think you guys will probably love it. If you like South America, you'll love Quito.
Yeah, and we will, my Spanish is horrible, but most of the team can speak passable Spanish, so it'll be fun times.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, I want to thank you for. Did you have something else to say?
No, I was going to say I don't speak any Spanish, and 9 years ago we got by just fine. So,
Matthew, I just want to thank you for coming on the show and taking time out of your day to do this. We really appreciate it and enjoyed it. I'm glad after a few years, we finally got you on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I mean, anytime if you guys want to talk in the future, let me know.
Absolutely. And you can, of course, go to theflightdeal.com for all the deals, and there's also fairdealalert.com. Matthew Ma, thank you very much. And you can follow. Go ahead.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. You can follow Dots, Lines, and Destinations on Twitter at DotsLines, moredotsmorelines.com. Thanks for listening, and bye-bye for now.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.